of the Book of Kings, where Yeravam is going to become a king of the 10 tribes. However, we're not really ready yet for that. First, Shlomo has to die, and his son is going to make some mistakes, and in the meantime, Yeravam might have been given that uh, prophecy that he's going to become the king, but it hasn't really materialized. It's not going to materialize until a little later. But in the meantime, we do read about it here. And I did also want to just go over a little of what we discussed last week. Last week, we discussed that the big question in about this chapter is, what exactly did Shlomo HaMelech sin? What was his sin? What did he do? We find this a similar situation with David HaMelech, where we know they both sinned, but it's a little vague what the specific sin that the Torah, that Hashem considered, was their sin. So David has his sins, and what's interesting is when you think about King David. Sorry about that. It looks like we have some noise in the background here. When we talk about these great righteous people, this is what we keep on finding, is that although they did have sins, they also were extremely righteous. And we, at least if you'd speak to the general public about who was King David and King Saul, generally they'll think of them as great righteous people. I mean, we one of the greatest books that we use for prayer is the book of King David, the book of Tehillim, the book of Psalms. So obviously, as much as we think of, as much as there was definitely some issue with what David did with his sin with Bathsheba and so on, nevertheless, the overriding and the great understood the great picture of David is a picture of greatness and holiness and purity and so on. The same thing as with Shlomo HaMelech. We have a great picture of him with holiness and purity, and yeah, I mean, he wrote some of the books of great books of the Tanakh. I mean, that's not a small thing. It's much greater than winning one of those Benjamin Franklin awards or something like that. Is to get your book as accepted, canonized as part of the Tanakh, part of the 24 books of the Tanakh. So he, and the fact is, I mean, we even have some decrees that are kept today are still from King Shlomo's decrees, and obviously he was a great king. But at the same time, we do find in our chapter it talks about his sins. And so last week we tried to figure out and reconcile how do you understand what his sin was, because the verses make it sound like he actually worshipped idols. And from the beginning, I mean, even verse number 1 is he loved these non-Jewish women. That's the way the verse begins. Nashim nachriyais, he loved them. And I mean, just think of those, just words like that. Who would even want to say that about any Jewish man, that, oh, he loved non-Jewish women? It sounds like a terrible, terrible thing. But then you have, even in the second verse, that it says a very extreme term over there, that it says that Hashem said, don't marry them, and they shouldn't marry into you, and they will turn your hearts. In those, Shlomo Davak. Davak means he clung to them with love. So then it talks about the, we of course we did this. I don't want to go over the actual verses, but but you do see that Hitu es Levava, verse Dalet, verse 4, where they swayed his heart after the gods, these idols. And then verse 5, I mean, he went after Asheros, the god of the Zidonites, Zidonim, and Milcom, the god of the Ammonites, Ammonim. It sounds like he's worshiping idols. And of course, last week we tried to say that he didn't, but how do you translate the verses? How do you fit it? So that's what we struggled a little last week with this problem. So I just wanted to touch on that and mention that this whole issue of Shlomo marrying too many wives and having too many horses. This was an interesting scenario where Hashem in his Torah never gave us reasons. The mitzvahs don't really have reasons. Why should I put tefillin on? Why should I do this mitzvah? Keeping Shabbos and the holidays and the sacrifices. It doesn't really say reasons for the mitzvahs. But the two mitzvahs that it does say a reason for are why is a king not supposed to have too many wives? And why is he not supposed to have too many horses? It actually does say a reason. In those mitzvahs, it says too many horses will cause you to want to go back. You or your servants will go back to Egypt to get more horses because that's basically place where there were horses. It says the reason for not to have too many wives, they will turn your heart astray. So it does say reasons. And Shlomo HaMelech sort of laughed at these reasons. He said, oh, they don't apply to me, which we basically now understand why Hashem didn't give reasons for all the other mitzvahs. Because if you give a reason, what ends up happening is someone has room now to exclude themselves. That's the reason you can't do that. Okay, that reason doesn't apply to me. Oh, that's that reason that's why you can't do the other thing. Oh, that doesn't apply in this scenario. Doesn't apply to our country. Doesn't apply in our place. Once you start giving excuses, it limits it. So this gives us, in a certain sense, the whole story of Shlomo gives us the ability to fulfill mitzvahs in a way that we don't understand the reasons, and we understand why Hashem didn't want to give us the reasons. In other words, Shlomo's sins gave us clarity. Shlomo's sins, so to speak, or whatever the sins were. So just this is like more of a preface. It sort of gives us a little clarity on all the other mitzvahs. Now, on the one hand, it's very nice to have reasons for everything because then you absorb the reason and you can understand it, you relate to it, you connect with it. But ultimately, if you have the reason, it also gives a lot of room for excuses. And you could give yourself as many reasons why it doesn't apply to yourself and excuse yourself for not following it. So ultimately, Shlomo HaMelech made this mistake, and he thought, "I'm too wise. I'm so wise. I won't. My wives will never be able to cause me to go astray. I have the wisdom that will be able to help me rule over whatever the women convince me and all their wrong. Anything that they think. I'm not going to be misled by their mistakes and their foolishness and so on. I'm not going to be end up going to control myself. I'm not going to. I know maybe I'll want to go to Egypt, but I'm strong enough to control my desire. And sure enough, both of those things he was wrong for, and his heart was turned away, and he basically sinned in both of these areas. And we also know that he, when he married the daughter of Pharaoh, we saw last week that it started to cause the diminishing in his wealth. His wealth actually was becoming less. We saw that difference if silver had any value or didn't have any value, a contradiction in the verses, which is brought in the Talmud. So ultimately, he did make this mistake of finding some excuse that he thought he would be different, and he wasn't. And then getting onto this idea of the
Rabbi.
yes,
Yeah, I don't know if you saw my hand.
yeah, I did, but
I'm sorry.
is it about this or is it about the question of why? What do you want to say? A question, an answer?
No, I want to
I'm
say
not
you're
really.
saying. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead. You
I
finish.
sort of want to finish, and then I'll come to you. So the issue of Shlomo, following other gods, and worshiping these other gods, and so we're trying really to figure out how the verse says that, and if he didn't really do it. So the one understanding is that he didn't oppose the wives enough that he should, in a way that he should have. In other words, he should have been a zealot, and he should have protested more. And he didn't protest. And when you don't protest to something, you are considered guilty of it. And this is this is a common understanding in the Torah, that a person who doesn't protest, in fact, it's brought in the Tanya, where you don't protest, you're also called a wicked person, a rasha. That a person has a responsibility to protest when something is being done wrong. And here, especially, it's regarding someone in his family, his wife. He should have made a protest and been more zealous for God, and oppose the idolatry. In addition to that, he should have punished his wives. Now, of course, that gets into a whole new discussion of is a husband, but what does a husband do, or what, how do you deal with a spouse that's not following proper rules of the Torah? So, but here it's brought down this concept of you have it's brought in the commentaries, maybe more Sephardic. I don't know if you could say the differences between different countries where people are, but it is brought down this concept that he should have punished his wives or rebuked them, and instead, because of his love for them, he didn't rebuke them. So that's another element of this idea of not opposing them. To what extent did we expect that he should have protested? He should have rebuked them. He should have divorced them, maybe. I mean, I didn't see it mention that, but I guess that would be the final conclusion, would probably be that he should, if he really was opposing it, he probably should have divorced them, even though it doesn't really, I didn't see it mention that in the commentaries, but I would think that would be the next step. Another concept that it's mentioned is that his love for them ended up causing less love for Hashem. So in other words, it sort of was a balance here, where if you have too much love for one, it lessens the other. So it keeps emphasizing the love he had for these women, that, as we mentioned earlier, the discussion if he converted them, or assuming
Rabbi,
assumedly he did convert them. Yes, Moshe, you can't wait.
look. Let me tell you. I heard somebody else at one point that he married these women for the purpose of controlling the nations, basically. Isn't this what he did? He wanted to control the people in their nations, and he wanted them, by having their women, he figured that, I mean, it's the way this is approach. He did like Gashmiut. Right. He liked Gashmiut, but on the other hand, I don't think he did a Avodah Zorah, okay? I mean, it was basically, I think, political alliances. This is what he was. The horses were a sign of Koach. Koach also was a form of Koach. To have a number of.
What did you say? Koach.
Koach. Or having all the horses in.
Okay, Moshe, I think we understand, and we've spoken about it. We've touched on it. Good point. It's a good point. We'll touch on it again. But the point that I'm in the middle of making is that when you have love for two things, very often it's a contradiction. Like if the more love you have for one, the less love you're going to have for the other. So the more love that he had for Hashem, the more love he had for Hashem, the less love he'll have for these women, and for their all their issues and their idols. But the more love he had for them meant the less love he's going to have for Hashem. So when it emphasizes that he went after these gods, again, we're trying to explain the meaning of the verse, that he went after these gods. What it meant was that his love for these wives that he protest, so it means that he was sort of like going after their gods. His love, because he didn't protest them, or he didn't punish them, or because simply the fact that he was in love with these women to that extent that caused him to have less love for Hashem, which basically meant it was almost like saying that he was going after these gods. In other words, his love for these women was it minimized his love for Hashem. And they even take it a step further that that his love for these women was a very youthful love, in a time when he should have had a more mature adult's love that was more subdued. So in other words, he had this passionate love for these youthful, young for these women that in his level and in his situation, his age, he should have felt he should have in his knowledge, really his knowledge with his wisdom, he should have been more, his love for them should have been much more subdued. And this really takes us to the to what Moshe was just mentioned, is the fact that there is a concept that he had in mind to cause there to be peace and respect for the Jewish people and honor and relationship with showing the nations about us, about the uniqueness of the Jewish people, and ultimately bringing world peace and so on, and sanctifying God's name. And so these are all great ideas, but ultimately it all carried with it an expense. And the expense was that there was less love for Hashem, that the expense that there was idol worship. The expense that there was idol worship, the expense that he didn't rebuke them or punish them or protest. So in other words, it all carried with it a major expense to the Jewish people. And these ideas pretty much give us an understanding of why he's considered to have worshipped these other gods. Now, there is one more explanation that's also mentioned, of a more Kabbalistic idea, and that is that Shlomo HaMelech taught these women the secret concepts of what we call the angel above of all the nations. Every nation has an angel in heaven, and so he taught them methods. He taught them about these angels and how there are ways of sort of like manipulating the system and getting blessing for your nation. And because of his great love for them, he taught them these secrets that he never should have taught them. And it was considered like he was worshiping other gods and wasn't following the rules of how it, these type of teachings are not meant for people in their situation. And so for that as well, he was considered to have too much love for for them, and not enough love for Hashem and for the rules of the Torah and so on. And now I'd like to let David, who's been had something to say a while ago, if you'd like to say something, sure.
Yeah, when you were saying that we don't know the reasons, it's not given the reason for tefillin or the reason for the mezuzah. In the Shema itself contains it says Laman. As soon as you say Laman, that's telling the reason. I'm not saying that this is the only reason, but it says in the Shema, it tells you about tefillin, it tells you about mezuzah, it tells you about teaching it to your children, and then it says Laman. Laman Yirbu Yimeichem, in order to prolong your days and days of your children on the land which Hashem swore to your fathers to give to them. So it just triggered that idea, the whole idea of Laman. The word Laman means I'm going to give you the reason, even though there's other reasons or they're not reasons. You know what I'm saying? The word Laman means here's some reasons.
Right. Now, when you speak about Laman Yirbu Yimechem, that wouldn't be considered a reason. That would be a reward. In other words, that's sort of like telling you that that will be the reward. And so, in other words, it's not explaining the reason. You get what I'm saying? That there's a concept of, if you do this, I will let you live. You will live a long life on the land that I gave you. That's not telling you the reason why you should do this. It's telling you that it would be worthwhile for you to do this, but not the reason why you should actually do this act. It's not explaining the act, why you should keep the Torah. It's saying that it's worthwhile for you to do it, but it's not giving you the reason. That was, why am I commanding you to put the mezuzah on your door? What's the reason? Honestly, we don't know, but it'll ultimately bring a reward. It's worth it for you to do it because it'll bring a reward. Of course, we should do it because God commanded us, but also in order that you will merit a long life. But again, it's not that's not exactly a reason. You get what I'm saying? Like there must be that each mitzvah has a reason behind it, that it's ultimately bringing some mitzvah. So I wouldn't use that as a sort of like a question on this concept that the reasons are generally not given for the mitzvahs. I don't think that contradicts it.
Okay.
But it's a good point. It's a good point.
Because I used to, when I would ever see that word Laman, I think, well, gee, isn't this a reason? Isn't this saying here's a reason? Right.
It's like if you tell your child, you better wear your sweater because it's cold out. So the parent says, and you know why you better do it? Because otherwise, you won't get your, you're not going to have dessert, tomorrow. That's not a reason why he should wear his sweater, because he's not going to get dessert. It's the reason why he's going to need a sweater is because he catch a cold. But you know what I mean? So it's like the Torah saying, oh, because you'll lose your dessert if you don't wear it. It's not a reason.
But it's more like the Torah is saying, if you do this, you'll get a long life, and if you don't, you won't. So that's
right, but that's not a reason why you should wear a sweater. The reason to wear a sweater, it doesn't say it all, which actually is because you will catch a cold. But that it doesn't say. It says the reason is because you will get reward. So that's not the reason for the mitzvah. It's a push for you to do it. Right. Anyway, but good point. Okay, I think Yisrael had. Mordechai. Maybe Mordechai was first. Yeah, let Mordechai. I think Mordechai had his hand up first. Yes, Mordechai.
Yes. Yes, regarding Shlomo, testing the Torah, testing Hashem, shouldn't he have learned from David the various tests, like he failed the test with Bathsheba, and then the Yefei Toar, who were also foreign wives. He had some pretty bad children and a lot of sorrows on account of those foreign women. So maybe he should have learned from that.
Yeah, it is interesting. The question is, let's see, what, they didn't have it written out the way we have it, the entire Talmud. In other words, if he had the Talmud with all the explanations of what David did and so on, I think it would have been more easier for him to maybe do the right thing. But I think it was at that time, it was probably not as, it wasn't as clear that he would be able to see these things as well. In addition to the fact that he felt that he's in a very different state than his father. See, everything changed for many reasons, and one major reason is that he had the knowledge that no one else in the world had. I mean, he understood animals talk. He understood the secrets of the science. I mean, he had the whole world coming to listen to. He was in a whole different. So his ability. Well, if you think of, we have the ability for our mind to rule over our heart. Can you imagine Solomon's ability for his mind to rule over his heart? If our mind can rule over our heart, how much more so could Solomon's, you would think such wisdom, he should be able to control, 1,000 of our evil inclinations. Solomon should be able to control because of his great wisdom. If you think about that concept of the mind rules over the heart, so with his mind, he should have been, extremely, and he was brought up with such, he seemed to be the most righteous of all the kids of, well, I don't know all because Kilov maybe um, was maybe considered someone who never sinned, but Shlomo seemed to be a very righteous individual, and so he was brought up properly. He had this great, great wisdom. He's also a child of great scholarliness from his grandfather Achitophel, who was also a huge scholar. So he had a lot of reason to think that maybe he would, he was able to handle different things that his father wasn't able to handle. And to some extent, maybe you could say he did handle it, except that we consider it that he worshipped idols. Again, it's not like did he sin in any, in any clear way. We don't have a clear, especially the way everyone explains it. He didn't do any act that was really. It was what he didn't do what was wrong. Notice he didn't protest, and he should have. He didn't. But what he didn't do anything actually wrong. It's what he didn't do that was wrong. That's what it seems, at least general understanding here. No, just 1 second, Moshe. We have Yisrael wants to say something. Yes, Yisrael.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I wanted to apologize to Mordechai for having started my discussion before he had his choice to speak. So I apologize, Mordechai. What it seems to me is if you look at Shlomo from 40,000 feet, and you try to assess what his fundamental challenge was, is that he would basically tend to go to excess in whatever he did. I mean, he went to excess even in the construction of the Beis Hamikdash. I'm not saying that was a wrong thing to do, but what I am saying is that he had a passion to do everything beyond limits in some respects. And the best case that I see here also is that he, to prove the point, is he married all these women, okay? And in so doing, he created himself a tremendous time management problem. And I think that he had a tremendous time management problem. I'm not being facetious here. In everything he did it to such excess that, notwithstanding his wisdom, he had a challenge.
Mm-hmm. So your main point is about the ultimate consequences of having too many wives, which one of them is a time management problem.
But that's part of it. But my observation is more is broader than that, because seemingly he had to have more horses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He seemingly was never content with the status quo.
Time to
very aggressive at times.
So in other words, the reason why you think it all boiled down to one mistake rather than two. In other words, it all boiled down to the life of luxury that caused him want a lot of wives, a lot of horses. Like one thing led to the other, but it ultimately really boils down to one mistake, which was the life of luxury, which ended up causing all the other all these issues that you can basically base them on one ultimate mistake. So the interesting thing is we don't find that he's like judged negatively so much for the luxuries that he enjoyed. In other words, he did it all for the sake for heaven, you know, like uh, that was his understanding of greatness. In other words, you know, it boils down to the famous question that fundraisers always have: that should I drive around in a schmata car, wear schmata clothing, have a torn shoe, and have this ripped? Will that get people to give me more money? Or will, if I drive around in a nice Lexus and you know, have a beautiful you know suit that looks like a man, which way am I going to be a better fundraiser? So, you know, it's an old debate that fundraisers always had. And to the extent that people used to even go in twos, they would have one guy who's the schmata and the other guy who's the well-dressed guy, and they would ultimately get all the donations, you know. But you know, the Shlomo HaMelech understood that the Lexus was the way to go. He felt that's going to bring, people are going to relate to him better. The wealthy people will, you know, this is how they're going to have respect for him. No one's going to have respect for you if you look like a shlum and shlomazel, and you know, you know, if you look that, it depends how, you know, if you look like a mashugana, you can't get too far. So he felt it was the exact opposite, and the whole world will have respect for him if he drives around in his Lexus. So it doesn't seem like that's considered a major sin. It's a good point that you're making, but I see what we're seeing, and I think it's a very good point, because I think it deserves to be discussed. That's what, you know, that's what you sort of see here, is that that's not really the mistake. And I'm not advising people that they should go out and buy a Lexus and waste their money on it. It's definitely a big waste of money, but it's in certain scenarios where people, depending on what a person's job is and a person's position, that he might need to drive around in a Lexus. You know, that might be something that is necessary for him to, in his position of authority, that people will treat him differently, and he you know, in order to accomplish things that he needs to accomplish, you know, sometimes that is what's necessary, you know. So that's it's an important you know, yeah, to keep in mind. Yeah, Moshe, just I think Anna just holding her hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I would like to bring one more point to our discussion. First of all, considering Shlomo's childhood, the way, the time in life of his father, King David, when he was born. His father was definitely extremely preoccupied with so many problems with children from previous marriages, from all kind of different political situations that he was, with his own insecurity of his kingship, of you know, being in charge. Remember how many times he doubted if he's really a king of you know, of Israel. That's why I'm sure it is all left really scars on Shlomo's life and his decisions. He was very influenced by his mother, who loved him dearly, but herself was not 100%, you know, a person who did things in a very, very clear kind of way, if we could consider that. That's why I'm sure all of these parts were changing his decision-making process. Okay, I am really, I became a king at age of 12. Do I have to prove that yes, my decisions are bringing wealth and prosperity and strength to the country? And definitely marrying people who are in, you know, in the level of power is really extending Israel's power as well too. And by the way, it's very, very common in all kind of noble families to do something similar, to have a marriage. I know in his case, it was maybe more kind of romantic involvement. That's why I think that his bringing, you know, his history, his life story, will give quite a few explanations of his decision. Again, like I said, a child who was raised by a mother is very often influenced by women a lot and really needs a support. But actually, my question was completely different, and I hope it's not very controversial. After you explain to us that idol worshiping is definitely, I understand how, how horrible and wrong and all of that is. But how do we consider now the religion of Christianity and Muslims? Is it considered an idol worshiping as well too? Or what is actually your opinion on it? It's something that I'm really curious about, and I would love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, well, so it's not so applicable now, but I'll just answer your question that idol worship. The question if Islam is idol worship, generally it's understood as they're worshiping God, so it's not considered idol worship. They have other sins of murder and rape and all other types of sins and so on, but it wouldn't be considered idol worship. In Christianity, it depends for a Jew or a non-Jew. According to Ashkenazic authorities, there would be a Jew would not be allowed, would be considered idol worship if they worshiped Christianity. A non-Jew would be allowed to, because it's called shittuf. It's called believing in God and in other entities. So for a Jew, you're not allowed to do that, of course. But for a non-Jew, Ashkenazic authorities allow a non-Jew to have double belief as long as they also believe in God. Sephardic, like the Rambam, doesn't agree with that, and the Rambam holds that they're also considered idol worshippers. Christianity. So that would just answer your question. Again, I think that's not really.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. But it's
okay,
really. Thank you for doing it. It made much more clear my understanding of what idol worshiping, because I thought that as long as they believe in Father and Son, it's already creates some kind of multiple gods.
Anyway, I don't like to bring up anything about Christianity.
Sure. I understand. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Someone
Rabbi,
else. Moshe. Yeah, Moshe.
Yeah, Rabbi. I wanted to say, this leads me to believe, that the kingdom of Judah, where David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech come from, they're philanderers. This is what they're trying to say. Now, what I'm trying to get at here is the Novaim. They should be the ones ruling Israel instead of the kings, because if this is they keep trying to make these kings, the melechs, they averot, they keep committing averot. This doesn't speak well for the future of our leadership here in Israel during these times. I mean that, if you can't have a king that can lead Israel, then how can you have a prime minister or anybody else run it? It means that there would have to be Navaim that would have to be running Israel, and the Shoftim. I mean, this is what makes me what I'm deducting from all this right now.
Well, there were righteous kings as well, very righteous kings.
No, I understand, but Shaul was not. He was from the tribe of Benjamin. He was from the tribe of Benjamin. But Yehuda, they're trying to say that these kings who come from the tribe of Yehuda are philanders. That's what they're trying to say.
So the fact is that after all said and done, Hashem still loves David, and wants the kingdom to stay with David, and wants the kingdom to stay with Shlomo, and so on. So they're
I agree. I agree with you. But
we've been seeing is that what about Moses? Also sinned. He didn't get let into Eretz Yisrael. And so look at that. There can't be any leadership. We can't have any leaders. Even Moses, the holiest of holy, right? I mean, he had the rock. It's easy to say, but we don't really look at it that way. Yeah. Yes, Penina.
With regard to Moshe Rabbeinu, I've always been told, I always understood, because I thought it was such a small thing, and especially Levium, I should know I'm about Levi. It's to lose temper. I mean, all he did was hit the rock. Now, the thing is, but I've been told that because Moshe Rabbeinu was at such a very high level spiritually, that the slightest thing was held against him. Even
The
such a
same thing
thing like
applied to David. Same thing applied to David and Shlomo. David and Shlomo.
But
Same thing. They were on
the
such
thing
a
with
high
me,
level.
I wanted to say with regard to David, and especially with regard to Shlomo, that I mean, I read about this. I mean, I read about Chesed and Gebura and the Kabbalistic concepts. I read about it from Chabad and other sources. The point being that it seems like, with respect to Shlomo, he had a tendency to be maybe a little bit overly Chesed, which would allow more liberality with respect to these other women and would involve reaching out more rather than a tzimtzum, rather than a contraction and a gevuradic strictness to things. It wasn't in his nature. He was a man of largesse. He was a man of great generosity of spirit, as the Arabs would say, but I mean a bigness to him, and it was a big thing to him to want to enlarge the context of the kingdom and to have these political alliances by way of these marriages.
Mm. Right. Interesting way of looking at it, that Shlomo had the more chesed style to him. That's definitely an interesting idea. And that maybe was the cause of his failures, so to speak, to rebuke. He didn't want to rebuke. I would add that point to it. In other words, what you're saying, that he was very chesed, you should add the concept of he didn't want to rebuke and punish them. It was
especially that could have affected the international relationships. I mean, I even understood that he didn't even know very well some of these people that he married.
Right. Now, the thing is that although this was possibly his nature, as you're saying it, which could be, nevertheless, that's not an excuse for him. It's just it just gives us a little more understanding, if you get what I'm saying. In other words, it's not what you're saying is just giving us a little more of the picture, but it's not really excusing him. In other words, he would still be held responsible. It just shows that he sort of followed that personality, that style, that mentality, or the personality trait, maybe too much, and maybe he shouldn't have. But again, it doesn't excuse it. So anyway, these are all the explanations that what we've been discussing here has all been trying to touch upon, give a little understanding of his sin of idolatry, what it was, and obviously what we're seeing here is that it had nothing to do with him worshiping idols.
Rabbi,
I didn't see this mentioned. Yeah. What you
just one more quick question. Did Shlomo Melech say Tehillim?
Maybe he should have. Would have protected him, maybe. But I didn't see this mentioned, but I wonder if maybe he's found, it does imply as if he built these houses of idols, which seems very surprising. Obviously, he didn't willingly do such a thing, but what it possibly, maybe there is this concept of maybe he had given them certain stipends to his wives, or some type of a allowance or something, and maybe there's some element of him being found guilty because of that, as if he backed these type of houses of worship for the houses of idolatry. But I didn't see anywhere mentioning or emphasizing that idea. Just an interesting thought that maybe he might have been found responsible for. In other words, when you give someone money, you're sort of like responsible to some extent what they're using it for. In any event, so these are the explanations here, and I think let's see where we're up to. Chapter 11, and there were two other stories actually that we did. Hadad, and the story after Hadad was the story of Rezoin ben El-Yoda. These were two other stories of basically people who fought against, harassed Shlomo HaMelech, that although we say that he had a lot of peace in his time, but he did end up suffering somewhat from some individuals that harassed him. And one of them, we said, was this Hadad, who he was at one point. David and Yoav had wiped out his town, and he was the king, but he didn't have really any followers. And David asked Yoav, "Why don't you wipe out the women as well?" This was a whole story where Yoav studied read the word wrong. There's a place in the Torah where it says wipe out the remembrance of Amalek, and the word for remembrance is Zecher, and Yoav read it Zachar, all the males. So he understood that you have to wipe out only the males. David HaMelech said, "Why didn't you wipe out the females?" He says, "What do you mean? It says Zachar." David HaMelech says, "It doesn't say Zachar, it says Zecher." So Yoav read it wrong. Yoav was very upset with his teacher. Why didn't his teacher correct him when he read it? He read it Zachar. He should have corrected him that it's Zecher, the remembrance, not the males. Anyway, ultimately, David HaMelech then buried all of the. This is a story that we had earlier on in this series of Tanakh. And anyway, bottom line was that this Hadad was the king, and ultimately now he's coming to take revenge. And he stops off in Egypt, and he tries to get some mercy from the king of Egypt. And that was interesting story a little, where he gets actually the king of Egypt seems to be very friendly with him, and seemingly at least one understanding is that he wanted to make sure that he doesn't take revenge against the Jewish people. So because his own daughter was married to Shlomo, so the king of Egypt, the Paro of Egypt, said, "Oh yeah, let me help you out." He gave him an area. You could be king over this little area, and he helped him out. So there is such a concept that he was trying to protect his son-in-law Shlomo HaMelech, but ultimately he ended up leaving this Hadad, and he ended up causing some problems for Shlomo. And then you have the other story of the other story is with Rezoin. And that's verse 23, that Hashem made another problem for David HaMelech. This is Rezoin, the son of El-Yoda, and he went to Damascus and so on. He basically was a thorn to the Jewish people, and to Shlomo HaMelech, made trouble in the days of Shlomo, and he ruled over this Aram, this place called Aram, which ultimately leads us into the story of Yeravam. So we're going to start with Yeravam here, and we're in verse 26. Yes.
Rabbi, Aram is Syria. We have Aram Sova and we have Aram Domestic. I mean, that's Syria, Aleppo and
Aram
Damascus.
Naharaim. I think you mean Aram Naharaim.
Aram Naharaim, the two rivers, yeah.
Right.
So,
right.
And Hadad, I thought also was a Syrian. No, I mean the Hadad. I mean,
it's possible. I didn't really look at the geography and to see, but maybe, yeah, could be. But here we're talking about Rezon. Rezon became the king of Aram. So I'm not sure if you're mixed. Do you mean Rezon or do you mean Hadad? I think you might mean Rezon.
Actually, I was mentioning that Aram. I was referring really, like you say, to Aram Naharaim as being Syria, but Hadad, right, which is a separate issue, which you mentioned earlier, but I didn't catch it. What you were saying, I thought I read. I don't know that name Hadad. It's also associated with Syria, I didn't think it was associated with Egypt. So that was a separate issue that I was mentioning, and I'm asking about it.
Well, he wasn't associated with Egypt. He became associated with Egypt. They ended up marrying into the family. We read it last week. I didn't want to go into it, but we read about it last week that they actually ended up married the queen's sister, and the son was brought up in the palace. It seems like you got friendly with someone, you never know what they're might marry into your family.
Yes.
Yeah, the interesting thing. But that was last week. I didn't want to really go over every detail. But okay, so we're up to verse 26 here, 11:26. And let's see. So also Yeravim, the son of Nevat, an Ephraimite from Tzerua, from Tsereda, from Tsereda, and his mother's name is Tserua. So it says that where are we? Verse 26. So she was the mother was a almana widow, and Eved l'shleimai. Let me read the English. Also, Yeravim, the son of Nevat, an Ephraimite from Tsereda. His mother was Tserua. Tserua, yeah, and who was a servant to Shlomo, raised his hand against the king. So what happened? What does this mean? He was a servant to Shlomo. So the king basically, as we mentioned last week, that we also mentioned it again this week, that Shlomo Melech started needing money because he was living up this very extravagant lifestyle, and he was using splurging way too much. And so now he needed money. So he started taxing the community. So he had people in charge of each tribe. So who was in charge of the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh? None other than this very brilliant young man, Yeravim ben Nevat. He was a very smart, capable guy, Yeravim ben Nevat, and he was hired by Shlomo Melech to be the tax collector for Ephraim and Manasseh. And ultimately, this was going to help the king pay for his lifestyle. So what ends up happening is Yerovam started questioning certain things about the king's lifestyle, and different opinions. What he was upset about. Either he was upset about the fact that the king, which we'll soon see here in verse 7. Actually, let me read verse 27. This is a matter about which he raised his hand against the king. Shlomo had built up the Millo and closed up the breach left by his father David. So in verse 27, we see that it has something to do with this area that David HaMelech had left open for the people who came for the holidays of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. They came to celebrate the holidays there. So David HaMelech had left this open courtyard. People could come there, and they had a place. They would put their tent over there, pitch a tent, and they were all set. And also there were certain breaks in the wall that people would be able to enter to the Yerushalayim through these breaks in the wall. Now, what happened was Shlomo HaMelech did two things. Number one, he closed off this area. Number two, he closed off those breaches in the walls. People had to go through the regular gates. Now, what the problem with that was that the place, it means that people didn't have the regular place where they could go to stay. And also, what was he doing with this place? What did Shlomo HaMelech do? So he built the Millo, was a place for all the servants of the Bas Pare, the daughter of Pharaoh. He had a whole complex for all of the workers of the daughter of Pharaoh, all her servants and so on, and everything like that. So in other words, it created a whole question as to is he doing the right thing? Is Shlomo HaMelech really doing the right thing? Look at what he's doing. And second of all, he also closed off this area that people had the ability to get through. And Shlomo HaMelech seems like he closed it off in order for taxing purposes. Now he's going to be able to keep track of every single person who comes through because they have to go through the gate, the regular gate. And ultimately, Yeravim felt that this is basically wrong. So There is also this idea that when Shlomo married the daughter of Pharaoh, the time that we mentioned either last week or 2 weeks ago about the fact that he slept in. They kept the Beis Hamikdash locked. Like we see, like he's really the downfall going. Like Shlomo is not as righteous as he should be. So Yeravam is starting up a little rebellion, a question, raised his hand against the king, and Rashi says Rashi uses the term that he even rebuked him publicly, and so this is what's going on over here, and this is the matter about which he rebuked him, and David had in mind to help out the people who were coming, and all you're doing is making this whole daughter of Pharaoh. You're just making things for this girl you shouldn't have even married. Now the verse 28. This man Yeravam was a mighty man of valor, Gibor Chayil, and so he was a very capable guy. And it says Solomon had seen in the young man that he was one who did his work well, and he appointed him over all the taxation of the house of Joseph, which basically is this job of being in charge of collecting the tax of Joseph's house, which basically means Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, verse 29. What, Moshe? Do you want to say something? Okay.
No,
verse
I was
29.
just saying Ephraim and Manasseh, the house of Joseph.
House of Joseph includes Ephraim and Manasseh, to both tribes. It happened at that time while Yeravam was leaving Jerusalem, the prophet Achia the Shilonite found him on the way, and he was clothed in a new garment, and the two of them were alone in the field. So here you have Achia Hashiloni with Yeravam ben Nevat. One of them was wearing a new garment. It's a little vague which one of them. It could have been Achia or it might have been Yeravam, but one of them was wearing this new garment, and we'll soon see that Achia Hashiloni, Achia is the prophet, and he's going to basically say that Yeravam is going to now be in charge of many of the tribes, and is only going to leave Yehuda with one. And this story that he found them they were alone in the field is understanding that the Talmud talks about it. What does that mean? He was alone. They were in the field. That the entire they were such great scholars, Yeravam and Achia, that it was like all the other scholars were. It was like the entire Torah to them was open to them, to Achia and Yeravam. The entire Torah was open like a field, like it was